there are lots of references to different variants, alpha, beta, delta variants at the moment. This seems to be a hot conversation. Could you perhaps explain actually what is a variant?
When a virus infects someone and infects a cell in particular, it basically hijacks that cell to make more copies of itself. Viruses can't do this on their own. They rely on the host that they're infecting to do it for them. So the virus gets our cells to make copies of itself so that it can spread further and further. But in making those copies, sometimes it makes a mistake in replicating its genetic code. Just like if you were copying down notes, let's say, from something and you were handwriting them and you were trying to go fast and do lots and lots of copies, at some point you'd probably make an error, forget to dot an I, something like that. Same thing happens with the virus. It can make some mistakes in making copies of itself. Now, some parts of the virus are more likely to have mistakes than others. And we see that the spike protein, actually, what the virus uses to get into cells, and it's a very important part of how the virus works. And that's why our vaccines target that spike protein. That part is quite prone to mutations. And so if one of those mutations, let's say, allows the virus to enter cells more efficiently, that might give it a selective advantage. That might mean it spreads more and more. And then we start seeing that version of the virus with that advantageous mutation accumulating in the population. When it accumulates enough and it changes the behavior of the virus enough, it becomes a variant of concern. And each of the 4 variants of concern that we're monitoring at this stage, they actually have many mutations. Some of them have up to 30 mutations. And altogether, that makes the virus behave slightly differently, makes it a little more transmissible. In the case of Delta, we think anywhere between 40 to 60% more transmissible than Alpha, or what was called B117, which was already more transmissible than the original virus causing COVID, which makes it a lot harder for us to manage.
Are the vaccines actually coping with these variants?
The good news is all of the vaccines being used in Canada and the US are incredibly effective at preventing the most severe outcomes, even against the most transmissible variant like Delta. So if you were to get infected with Delta, but you're fully vaccinated, that vaccination still offers more than 90% reduction in risk of being hospitalized or having a severe case of COVID from that variant. So that's why it's more important than ever. If you're getting a 2-dose vaccine, make sure that you go in to complete the vaccination and get that second dose. Now, if you do have even just 1 dose of the vaccine, the likelihood of you having a severe outcome is reduced. However, the more people who acquire infection in general, the more opportunities the virus has to mutate and for new variants to emerge. So being fully vaccinated gives the virus fewer opportunities to mutate. So we hopefully can stop getting new variants and squash this thing for good sooner.
On construction sites, one of the key issues that we have implemented to protect our workers from COVID is social distancing. These variants seem to be very transmissible. So does that social distancing still play an important part in making sure our people are safe in the environments in which they work?
Absolutely. All of the same protective measures that we've been using over the last year are still very effective and still very important. It's just that the margin for error is smaller now. On construction sites, I know ground workers may find it difficult to wear a mask because they're doing heavy labor, or you may need to come in closer. It could be harder to distance because you're lifting something together, or you just can't hear each other because it's so loud and everyone has to shout. But all of those things also increase the likelihood of transmission for COVID-19 unless everyone on that site is fully vaccinated. With more transmissible variants like Delta being as much as 40 to 60% more transmissible than Alpha, also known as B117, it makes it even more important for us to use as many tools in our tool belt as we can, like distancing, like masking, like doing things outside as much as possible, at least until we have enough people fully vaccinated or COVID levels are low enough in the area that it's low risk.
And do you think that this Delta variant, will get across, won't stay in local areas? Is it something that will be transmissible across the whole continent? And therefore people need to be, really looking out for that in any community rather than just specific concentrations?
Even if you haven't heard of the Delta variant being in your specific location, it likely already is, and if not, will be very soon. The unfortunate thing about how these viruses spread is that it's exponential. That means by the time we're detecting it, it's already reached more and more people. And so it's projected that Delta will be the dominant variant in all across North America and even across the world. And we've continually seen these mutations happen, and then they claim dominance, and then it moves forward. But luckily, with all the variants that have emerged so far, our vaccines are still incredibly effective. And that's why it's just best we nip it in the bud before we get bigger problems on our hands. If you want to read more about variants and how they impact vaccine effectiveness, you can check out some of the resources in the caption below. And as always, check out the other videos in the series and feel free to share them with any friends, family, and colleagues.